From a discussion of systems thinking, we have the opportunity to learn about practical and philosophical ideas pertaining to value creation for you and your relationships in life. I am Jason Stulgate and will host a series of discussions on exploring new perspectives. I am excited to share with you key information on an important model for sustained prosperity in both our personal lives and business. A little bit about me. I have 20 years of business experience, primarily in finding and delivering solutions for productivity. My interest has always been in finding ways to overcome barriers to productivity. I truly love marketing, sales, and business development. While pursuing my Bachelor of Science in Marketing at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale, my first leadership experience was as sales and marketing director with the American Marketing Association. Supporting Nextel's desire to create a learning organization in the 90s gave me crucial experience at improving performance. And to begin the new millennium, I learned even more from entrepreneurial experiences by starting ventures, including a telecommunication consultancy and international e-commerce business. Chances for growth or failure were always present, and along the way, learning valuable lessons provided the true growth for me as a learner and leader. While each industry has its own nuances, businesses overall have similarities. Essentially, someone has a problem or challenge, and learned leaders provide the right solutions. While I was completing my MBA at Keller Graduate School of Management recently, I was introduced to Hank, my economics, global strategy, and capstone professor. Mr. Noorani provided a dynamic approach to education through his practitioner experience and methods. As I invested time with him to understand systems thinking, I realized that his powerful methods were accurately named. The primary thing needed next was a consistent application of these ideas. I was able to see the universe in more real terms as a result of putting these practices into action regularly. Now, I work with him to assist companies in becoming happily engaged with solutions that make a difference to organizations, their markets, their people, and the entire world. Next, you will meet Mr. Hamid Noorani, author of Rational Decision Making and Power, the Modern Doctrine. Mr. Noorani is the founder and president of Powerful Methods, whose mission is to develop a new generation of leaders who serve the world by inspiring ordinary people to produce extraordinary results. As we talk, you'll be able to see Hank's passion for systems thinking, as this has become his life's work for nearly 40 years. His diverse global perspective offers a gift of hope and practicality at the same time. Our conversation is based on his book, Rational Decision Making, and includes the following topics: understanding the decision cycle, exploring the decision horizon, the hierarchy of objectives, the free market system, and globalization. Hello there, sir.
Hi, Jason.
One of the things about systems thinking is that it's said to have started back with Galileo in the 15th century and has continued to evolve over time. What do you believe about the origins, the evolution, and primarily the current state of systems thinking as a scientific model and its usefulness to leaders?
Well, some trace back systems thinking all the way to Plato. Because systems thinking is about holistic thinking. It's about seeing the big picture. And actually has been prevalent in the East longer before than Plato was born. Because that is the first thing humans try to do, try to absorb their understanding through observations as a holistic picture, rather than analyzing it. Analysis was first proposed by Aristotle, and did not become prevalent until the Renaissance period, with the rise of science, because analysis goes very well with science, scientific development. But then in analysis, you're destroying something. If you break something into parts for understanding, then what you are doing in the process of breaking it into parts, you are destroying the interrelationship between them, the interdependencies, the dynamics. So both Plato and Aristotle have come under heavy criticism from intellectuals. Personally, I don't think any criticism is warranted, nor any praise. These people were good thinkers. Personally, I think Plato was more of a good writer than a good philosopher. Aristotle made good contributions, but then we should not blame them for everything that went on for the last 2,500 years. There are other forces that shaped the time in between. The first writing of systems thinking as a formalized discipline was done by Ludwig von Bertalanffy in 1920s. Others have picked it up, have elaborated on it. Peter Senge comes to mind, a very good work on that. Then people started modeling systems thinking. Ed Deming, the pioneer of quality management, was a great proponent of systems thinking. He urged everyone to see processes, manufacturing processes, as systems that convert the input to the output. So there is a long history of systems thinking. My contribution is that I gave the sharpest definition I've seen anyone give. And I provided a model that is universal in its application.
While yours is the sharpest definition, I would like you to explain, if you can, in your own terms, how your version of systems thinking compares and also differs to that of Deming's PDSA cycle. Tell us how leaders can apply this model, and then what benefits your models offer in terms of value creation.
The cycle that Deming brought is very good and is best explained in terms of the decision cycle. So this decision cycle, again, many have said very similar things to this, but there are novel points about it. So decision cycle starts with situation analysis. You can see this in many textbooks on strategy management. They say analyze the situation first, internal analysis, external analysis. But here I'm asking to pause for a moment and see if you want to act. Is this something you want to act on? Not every situation warrants action. If it does, then you need to follow a stepwise process in order to come up with a solution, with a decision, with the choice that you want to follow. Unfortunately, most people go from here straight into implementation, and that is why most strategic initiatives fail. Before you even plan for implementation, what you should do is to test your decision. And this is, again, something novel, test of rationality. Let me find the right slide for you.
That's good that you bring up that test for rationality, because shortly we'll be talking a little bit more about that when we talk about the universal hierarchy of objectives and the ultimate test of rationality, which you state as love. So I'm very interested to find how you make those connections, the significance, and what it means for us today.
Yeah, these are great questions, Jason. Test of rationality is before you actually go plan the implementation of the choice you have made, before you finalize your decision, is to ask yourself these 6 questions. Is the selected course of action the optimum response to the situation? That gets you to think of other possible options that you may have overlooked. Does this course of action offer the highest benefit at the lowest cost? So is this the right way to go? Are the costs affordable and manageable? If you cannot afford the cost, your course of action is not viable. You cannot afford the cost. Are the risks affordable and manageable? If you cannot afford the risk, again, it's not the right course of action. Is this course of action ethical? Which means, does this course of action maintain the systems that maintain us? And finally, is this course of action moral? Does this course of action fulfill our obligations to others? Only if your decision, the choice that you have made, fulfills all 6 criteria, then it's something you can go ahead and implement it.
Puts a different perspective on it than some of the things that I've seen working in different learning organizations over time. So a lot of time, it seemed, to borrow your phrase, ready, fire, aim, instead of actually seeing what the true impact of that is. And I guess one of the things that brings a little bit light into this situation is your law of unintended consequences. Maybe you can just give us a couple of quick tips on what exactly that means, so that when we are testing for rationality, we can prevent ourselves from getting into situations that could be less than optimum.
The law of unintended consequences was coined by someone else. I don't claim credit for it. It has been in usage before I taken it to explain system principles. But what it means is that when you make a decision to manage your department in the organization, there is a decision context and there is a decision scope. Decision context has been explained in many textbooks on decision making. Decision context is the setting in which the decision is made. So you want to make a decision for your department is the decision context. What I'm saying is that once you make that decision and implement it, the scope of that decision spills beyond the context. Actions that you take just to manage your department is going to affect your input departments, it's going to affect your output departments, it may affect the whole organization, the division, it may actually have impact all the way to the environment. So what it says is that once you make a decision, you cannot evaluate the full scope of its consequences. It's physically impossible. When we make a major decision, it involves a cascade of decisions made by others in response. And how it shakes out overall, there is no way for us to know. It's unknowable. The best we can do is to make the best decision at the time, considering ethics and morality and how we are impacting the organization as a whole. But that is all we can do.
And I think that will get me to another question that has been pressing for me, and that is in reference to your modern rational model or your decision horizon. Because as these single decisions affect so many different aspects of things in its current context and the scope, one of the things I would like to find out from you is that you've made this statement, and I want some clarity. You say that organizational decisions are made increasingly by groups that are cross-functional, multicultural, and geographically dispersed. Help me understand how a business can utilize this model to address the short and long-term scenarios, starting with philosophy.
You are touching on two issues. One is the interdependence on the various levels of decision. The other issue is about the interdependence between professionals who collectively make decisions on behalf of the organization. In group decision making, there is a lot of problems. One is that people lose sight of what they are trying to achieve. They try to brainstorm what would be nice to have. They don't get into agreement, they break up. Then top management comes and orders everybody around and tells them, this is what we're going to do, you go. You go and find ways to justify it. And again, it's wrong. What you want to do is to give everyone a process so they can follow it methodically and stepwise in the right sequence so they arrive at the most optimum decision for the organization. And this decision cycle guides a group decision to that end. For example, if you are making a strategic decision that involves multiple parties from multiple branches of the company in multiple locations in the world, they need a script, they need a process they can follow stepwise, and then the leader can actually guide them through these steps. So they know precisely which step they are in and what is the next step and what they need to do each time.
One of the things you just mentioned leads to my next question, and that is the management comes in and tells them, you do this, without really having any real understanding of what really is the mission or the goals. But with the enormous amount of focus and pressure that a lot of organizations have on just the bottom line, how can organizations embrace and create a productive culture, one that's self-sustaining using your model?
The first rule of productive culture starts with respect, which means you grant others the same rights you wish for yourself. At first, some people say, well, this is like the golden rule, do unto others what you want them to do to you. But this is actually somewhat different. This is about rights. What rights do you wish for yourself? For example, you wish the right to have your own views. You wish the right to make mistakes. You wish the right to share your views. So you should allow others have the same rights. So the question of granting others the same rights you wish for yourself gets you to ask yourself, what rights I wish for myself? And list them. And then you grant those rights to others. Productive cultures is very central to productive cooperation among people. Without a productive culture, it's just about impossible to have productive cooperation. The second rule of productive culture is acceptance unconditionally. And that comes from self-acceptance. If you accept yourself unconditionally, then you can accept others unconditionally. Here we're talking about the leadership qualities. If you have unconditional self-acceptance, that leads to unconditional acceptance of others. The reason people have problem accepting others is because they are in effect putting conditions on accepting yourself. If you say you find an action objectionable in someone, what you are really saying is that if you did that thing, you wouldn't accept yourself. When you say doing something is objectionable to you, means you wouldn't do it. You would not accept it of yourself. Which means, in effect, you are putting conditions on accepting yourself. But once you become aware of your intrinsic human worth, everything else about you really becomes of less significance. The most important thing about you and about every other blessed member of the human family is their intrinsic human worth. And once you accept that, then you accept yourself unconditionally, and that allows you to accept others unconditionally. We talk about respect. If you respect your own rights, it's easier for you to respect the rights of others. If you love yourself and you nurture yourself, it's that much easier to love and nurture others. If you understand yourself, it makes it that much easier to understand others. This is based on your common human profile. If you understand yourself in terms of the common human profile outlined in my books, then you see that others have the same profile. There is no reason to reject anyone for any reason. And if you know your innate human needs, well, then you know others have similar innate human needs. If you are independent, then you can become interdependent. If you are emotionally centered, then you can be rational and you can be proactive. If you have clarity of thought, then you can have clarity of expression. If you have commitment to rational thought, then you're ready to commit to others. Did I answer your question?
I think you've put a nice touch on helping us understand those qualities and what it really does mean for the culture, because it really starts with the individual, and with the individual having whether a leadership role or whether it be another role in the organization, that interdependency that you mentioned here comes from that independent thought. And that is one of the things that does harness innovation and all the great things that we hear about organizations. The next thing that I think about is some things that we've talked about over time. A couple of statements that you've made, and I laugh when you say them, but it's because it's so obvious. And one of those is, those who fail to see the big picture are bound to mismanage it, and system poorly designed can't be well managed.
We've talked in different contexts, of governments and corporations and religion and things like that. But today I just wanted to focus on education. And as you answer that, I'd like you to help me put it into your systems design, the global design, and also the systems management of that.
What we don't realize is that we are all designers and managers of systems. When we intervene, when we make a change in a system, we are actually designing the system. And we often don't see the implications of what we are doing. For example, you often see in organizations, they come up with a new policy. And they get everybody excited, everybody trying to follow the new policy. Next month, there is a new policy.
Right, the flavor of the month.
And then it makes no reference to the policy given last month. And they doesn't say, how can you achieve the new policy while you still have to do the old policy at the same time? They don't go together. Eventually, these policies line up so much that the only way people can do their jobs is actually if they ignore all those policies. There is no other way they can do their jobs. This is an example of system design and system management. That if you want to have a productive enterprise, you need to streamline all the value chain activities in that enterprise. New policy is of value only if it streamlines the value chain activities, which means greater output at a lower cost. So if the policy is there just because somebody got into a panic and fear that you might do something wrong, it becomes more of a barrier than a tool. And the national laws are very much the same. A law should be held legitimate only if it furthers the sovereignty of the individual or enhances, facilitates private transactions. So if the law does not empower the individual, does not facilitate private transactions, one has to question its utility.
As it relates to education overall, how would you put that process, that model, into effect in just an educational context?
Yeah, first we have to see what do we mean by education? What are we doing to students when we say we are educating them? Are we just giving them more knowledge, more information, or are we really shifting their perspectives and allowing them to see things in a new way? So education means you have to elevate the students' expectations of themselves. When you raise their expectations of themselves, then they endeavor to broaden their perspectives. And when they broaden their perspectives, then their horizons will expand. Now that is education. Not so much giving them answers, but showing them how to find the right answers. Not so much giving them just facts, but setting them off on a journey to discovery.
As we look at their productive utility in their more formative years, it brings me to your decision horizon model again. It's in your book as figure 1.8, where you're talking about philosophy as the guiding principle all the way down to the daily operations. Those are things that I'd like to get a better understanding, because it seems that so many organizations stop somewhere around the vision and mission component. It might even get into culture, but it doesn't really take off. So help us understand the horizon and what its implications are for businesses, or any organization for that matter.
Great question. Most people are very comfortable making operational decisions. These decisions have very short impact time. But planning decisions have a longer impact time on the organization, or even on the individual, if you are making an individual decision. A strategy has probably 3 to 5 year impact time on the organization. Vision has a longer time, mission broader. Philosophy really has the longest. We rarely question our philosophy. We keep it fixed. In fact, most people are not even aware that they are using a philosophy. If you tell them about their philosophy, they say, oh, we don't spend time for that kind of thing. Because they don't recognize that they are following a philosophy. The point is that you cannot make these other decisions without some basis of your understanding of how the world works. What is your worldview? That is basically your philosophy. What is your rational model? Most people have no idea because they don't even know how to articulate it. Even among the most educated, they don't know how to articulate it. Researchers, they have to talk about the ontology of the research, which is similar to philosophy. But philosophy for most people is something wishy-washy, abstract, and a lot of debate, no action. People want to get straight to action. People like to make operational decisions because they get straight into the action. Whereas what we are saying here, that your operational decisions are best guided by planning decisions. Your planning decisions are guided by your strategic decisions. Strategic decisions guided by the vision. Likewise by the mission, culture. And philosophy is guiding all those decisions. Whether you're aware of it or not, it is there.
Let's take the inverse of that. How does a decision at an operational level affect the philosophy, or how might it affect the philosophy? In that same example that you had mentioned about how that spills over from the scope and context.
So people start with a philosophy. If they articulate it very well, they can articulate it as a worldview. And in my books, I have articulated a worldview for systems thinking as a philosophy. From there, you can derive a rational model. And again, I have articulated a rational model based on systems thinking. Your rational model actually leads and guides your theories. Sometimes people come up with theories, but they are not clear about the rational model that shaped it. Theories shape your thought processes, which in turn shape your actions, which in turn lead to your experiences. But then from your experiences, you can actually refine your theories. You can integrate your theories and redefine a rational model, which then shapes a new worldview. As learned professionals, this is what we need to be doing. We need to not only be clear about our worldview and rational model, but constantly use our experiences to refine those theories, integrate those theories, redefine the rational model, and reform the worldview so that we have a continuous progress, continuous learning.
That's interesting, because one of the things that we see is that, when decisions are made and they aren't exactly the way that we might expect the outcome to be, we go through this type of a process, maybe subconsciously, but having some definition and some rationale behind why it is that we do the things that we do, it will help frame that perspective. It will give you a insight that perhaps had gone missing because you had ignored it in the past. I think of some of the examples from international business cases that I've studied, and some of the decisions that were made because of the idea that if we go over to this country, it will be the same as it is here in the United States. And then they get there, things are completely different.
So every one of the steps in the decision cycle, the last step is the learning. So that every time you implement a decision, you should really do a post-audit and see what can we learn from it. But having a specified process for arriving at that decision, testing it, planning it, and implementing it, helps you in the learning process, because you can go back and question every single step that you followed. The point here I want to make is that when you are planning for implementing your decision, you should also plan for learning. How are you going to make measurements while implementing, so that at the end of the implementation, you have information to use for learning. If you don't plan for learning, it doesn't happen. Learning from strategic initiatives need to be planned for. Just as you have milestones for accomplishing the implementation, on each milestone, you should do a learning exercise. We completed 10% of the project. What did we learn? Are the expectations greater than the target? Are the results greater than the targets, lower than the targets, or on target? Every one of those situations is opportunity for learning, so that when we do the next milestone, we are that much better prepared. And once the decision is implemented, then you do an overall post-audit, so that it informs your next strategic initiative.
Seems obvious again now that we're talking about it, but as you know, life happens. You know, there's always a lot of external factors at play. So I guess the thing is that actually making this work, how does an organization actually take the time and make the time and prioritize this to make it that important and that defined?
Yeah, if you tell most of our CEOs about this, they say, oh, we don't have time for that, we have fires to put out. So they never have time to do it right, but they always have time to do it over.
Seen that happen before at some companies I've worked for.
That's right. If they take the time to follow the process and do it right the first time, then they don't have to spend time doing it over, and therefore they will have more time to do it right first time.
And that will help them be more productive is what the
That's right.
deduction would be there, right?
Why keep putting out fires when you can at one time stop and thinking, how can we prevent fires?
Another question that has piqued my interest is in reference to your universal hierarchy of objectives, and this is something that has great value, in my opinion, across Fortune 500, any organization really, government agencies, nonprofits, because ideally, your whole ultimate test of rationality is love. So, from that base point, help us understand this diagram and how it makes sense in the big picture of things.
This diagram maps the entire rational scope of activities of an organization. For example, organizations exist for the pleasure of the owners. And sometimes owners want return on investment. Sometimes owners, if it's for-profit, if it's non-profit, they want contribution or service to someone. Owners supply the capital, but also they want return on investment. So the organization has to create wealth, both commercial wealth and social wealth. For-profit organizations focus on commercial wealth. Non-profits have to focus on commercial and social. But even for-profits really have to consider both kinds of wealth, not just one or the other. And there are only three processes for creating wealth. You either produce wealth for your own consumption, or you produce wealth for the consumption of others and trade, or you produce wealth collectively. What allows you to create wealth is your sovereignty, which is your capital, skills, health, and relationships. What allows you to develop sovereignty is your integrity. And the big component of this integrity is your capacity to learn and the capacity to love. A couple of points about this hierarchy of objectives is that, number one, there is nothing that you do that is rational and is not covered by this diagram. Everything you do that is rational for an organization is covered by this hierarchy. If you're doing something not covered by the hierarchy, you have cause to question why you're doing it. The other important point is that what you are seeing here is that everything that you do that is rational is really driven by love. And organizations have a hard time understanding this. What does it mean? It means that organizations are self-sustaining systems, just like an organism, just like a person. And to grow means to improve their performance, not just to improve size. Growth means increasing performance, which means becoming more effective and more efficient in what owners want you to do. To grow, it takes love, it takes caring, it takes commitment.
Nurturing.
It takes nurturing. There is no other way to grow without nurturing. The term nurturing sounds feminine to us because sometimes we say, well, that is not macho enough for a business world, but you cannot grow without nurturing. There is no other way. If you grow, the fact that you grow an organization, make it more effective and more efficient and more sustainable, now that is an act of love, whether you like to call it as such or not. It's no different than when you take care of your pet or your family or anything else that you are feeling comfortable calling it love. People have no problem saying, I love my country, but when it comes to their organization, somehow they say, well, organization love, well, it doesn't fit for them.
They might love their job. They might love their boss. They might like the landscaping outside or the park that's attached to it. So there's different perspectives on people and love. And, you know, I love science as part of my job, or I love sales, or I love helping customers. There's so many different things for different people. So,
but overall, all those acts are acts of love to the organization only if it supports the organizations to its goals of survival, growth, and the mission. Because love really is an act of service. It's an act of... That is what leadership is all about.
here we have another great example. You'd also had a slide, I believe, with a demonstration of the personal approach to this. And just see a little bit of a comparison between the two. I think that would give us some valuable perspective as well.
This is the individual hierarchy of objectives. And again, everything you do in a lifetime that is rational is covered by this hierarchy.
What is different here?
Here, you still, instead of having the joy of owners, you have the joy of living for the individual. Here, you have a mission for the individual. Individual chooses a mission in order to make a meaning out of their life. Mission means doing something of enduring value. Parents, you tell them what is your mission. They say, oh, we have no time for mission. We have to take care of our kids. Well, then you are that is your mission. And it's a great mission to have because kids teach you a lot. They teach you patience, they teach you leadership, they teach you listening skills.
Is that so? That's good stuff right there. Things I didn't already know.
But again, you notice here, love drives learning. Learning leads to integrity. Integrity leads to sovereignty. And sovereignty allows you to create wealth and leads to your commercial and social wealth. And then you use that to sustain yourself, to get the things that please you and achieve the things you choose as mission. And every now and then you take a part of your wealth and you reinvest in yourself so that you increase your capital, skills, health, and relationships so that you can create more wealth. If you love yourself, you invest in yourself. In fact, the greatest investment you can make is in yourself.
I'd have to agree with you after just finishing my MBA, and that was something that was a not easy task, but it's that continuity of challenge that drove me to some pretty interesting experiences and some dynamic team environments. So I really appreciated that. So in relation to this and the previous diagram, I think that sums up very well the differences between the two.
Yes.
And how organizations can benefit from these hierarchy of objectives. I wanted to step into a global context with this discussion, and hopefully you can move us into a diagram, figure 4.2. And for this one, I'm looking for you to describe to me some ways that international businesses can benefit from your systems thinking model as it relates to the free market system and government intervention, especially in a global context.
Here we see that the business system is a subsystem of the national economy. The national economy impacts the business, and the business impacts the national economy. But the national economy is a subsystem of a global economy. So the national economy impacts the global economy impacts the national economy. The global economy itself is a subsystem of the planet Earth, the environment. What happens on the environment impacts the global economy, which in turn impacts the national economy and impacts your business. The point about this is to recognize that you are not isolated. It's not about us versus them. Once you understand this diagram, once you see the interdependence between all these actors, the business, the investors, suppliers, customers, and the government, and how the investors are really investors, suppliers, and customers of other businesses, and likewise for suppliers and customers, you see that the business system is a node in a network of interconnected, interdependent, win-win relationship that spans the entire global economy. So disconnecting physically does not exist as an option. Whether you deal with this supplier or not directly, indirectly, you are still connected through this network. And the other thing it's telling you is that when you make a decision for your business, that triggers other decisions by your direct partners, investors, suppliers, and customers, and indirectly through the entire network of interconnections. So things that have happened, maybe a tsunami hits Japan, supply chains get disrupted throughout the world. It affects your business here in US.
And I think you just had clicked over to the next slide that we were going to talk about to frame how this free market system develops and grows, and how you layer over that these different things that do have that connection and interconnection, and what the implications are for those. So let's start with this basic model on the free market system.
Here you have the free market system, the supply and demand curve, as you see in every textbook. Of course, the diagram, the graph is actually wrong. The graph does not show you dynamics of what happens, because they don't show you the time axis. The time axis is actually sticking out of here. So you're looking into variations in demand and variations of supply over a long period of time, and they appear to cross at an equilibrium point, leading to an equilibrium price and an equilibrium quantity. From a system perspective, you can demonstrate that the variations in demand and the variations on supply cannot possibly ever be in sync. Demand can shift up and down very fast. Supply cannot go up and down as fast. There is a lag time differential. And we show that by this circular flow diagram. And this, you can see a number of textbooks on economics about the households, individuals, the resource market, businesses, and the product market. So as individuals, we may go online and click buy, and we buy something. It takes that fast. But businesses cannot produce that fast. It takes them a long time to respond to decisions made by individuals. There is a lag time differential. So what happens is that in the product market, you either have an oversupply of a product or a shortage of a product. So while free markets have adjustment mechanisms, these adjustment mechanisms cannot work smoothly. It's physically impossible. Free markets, by their very nature, over-adjust. They cannot help it. They cannot bring the quantity supplied exactly to match the quantity demanded. There's always shortage, surplus, price fluctuating all the time. The other issue with free markets is that these interactions between the businesses, product market, individuals, and the resource market, this you have a reinforcing loop. Notice you have a system that loops on itself. When a system loops on itself, it can be one of two types. It can be either a balancing loop or a reinforcing loop. A balancing loop is one that eventually finds its equilibrium point and proceeds at constant rate. A reinforcing loop snowballs on itself, feeds on itself, and goes faster and faster, gets into a vicious cycle. The economy is a reinforcing loop. If individuals cut back on their consumption of products, businesses don't have to produce as much, they don't need so much resources, there's going to be less income for the individuals, which actually reduces their consumption further. So what it means is that when individuals in an economy believe that dark clouds are about to appear over the horizon, they actually behave in ways in response that brings about dark clouds. And if individuals believe that the blue skies are about to break out over the horizon, again, they behave in ways in response that actually brings about blue skies.
Almost a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's exactly right. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what the natural consequence of these free market fluctuations is that you either have inflation in the product market or recession in the resource market. Free markets fail. If you look around the world and look at all the nations you feel sorry for, and study their history, you will see that these nations at one time were prosperous, thriving civilization, just like America is today. But free markets in those nations failed a long, long time ago. They got into feudalism, and society stagnated. And once the society stagnates, decline is inescapable. So governments really need to manage the economy. In the United States, we have two parts of the government managing the economy. We have the executive branch and the Federal Reserve. In order to balance between inflation and recession. Because free markets by themselves have no natural adjustment mechanism for that. The other way free markets fail is through income disparity, wealth disparity. Eventually, in every society, wealth is concentrated in the hands of few, depriving the many. This is a natural consequence of free market system. There is no natural adjustment mechanism for it. So governments have every now and then follow progressive policies or socialistic policies in order to balance that disparity. Otherwise, the society will end up with the French Revolution. So these are not problems you can overlook.
So these are tools like the monetary and fiscal policies that we see today.
That's right. Free markets cannot function by themselves over an extended period of time. Eventually, they fail. They not only get into inflation and recession, but also they get into wealth disparity.
And also you've mentioned to me that it's always a day late and a dollar short because,
well, fiscal policy.
Again, like your description with supply and demand, you don't have that third time frame component to overlay there. So the reaction to things that have already happened don't predicate what is on the horizon, dark clouds or blue skies.
That's right. Fiscal policy suffers from that because, especially in the United States, the executive branch needs congressional approval in order to act. So it takes them a long time to figure out if there is a problem. It takes them a longer time to figure out what to do about it. Then even when they realize what to do about it, they have to go to the Congress, and then all the horse trading, pork barrel spending, everything, earmarking, all starts. And by the time the bill gets on president's desk for signature, it's too little too late. Or perhaps even the wrong policy for the conditions at the time.
Sign of the times, no matter what time it is. I think that concludes the questions that I had for you today. I do value your insight, your opinions, and your time today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. Great questions.
Change is the lifeblood of all organizations. We can embrace it and learn, or be forced to embrace it on reality's terms. Objectivity, or seeing things as they are, is the first step in making rational decisions. Being equipped with tools and knowledge to continuously adapt is vital to sustainability. Seeing the big picture can inspire people to make extraordinary contributions to society. What you have seen here are powerful methods to apply to your situation. We welcome your inquiries into ways we can help you make a difference in your world starting today.